The Crypto Markets Update is presented by Grayscale, the world's largest digital currency asset manager.
Let's have a live look at Bitcoin. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XBX index currently trading at 47,113. Bitcoin is up about 2.5% over the past 24 hours. And the CoinDesk Ether price ETX index is at 3271. ETH soaring up about 3.7% over the day. And the new DFX CoinDesk's DeFi index is at 746. Also taking a bit to refresh on that page. We'll get back to it. All right, joining us now to discuss the crypto markets is Alexander Blum, managing partner at 2Prime, a crypto asset manager. Hi there, Alex. So over the weekend, we saw Bitcoin climb above $48,000. The crypto markets are above 2 trillion market cap. Would love to get a bit of your analysis on the markets right now.
Yeah, I think obviously crypto in general is back on the ascendancy after a couple months of pretty low or steady kind of low volatility conditions. I think that's a blend of both technical and fundamental factors. We've seen a ton of potential FUD that's had almost no impact on the rising price of Bitcoin, from US regulation to the disruption of Chinese miners. And every time one of those things is addressed, it's effectively one less risk factor to the long-term viability of crypto, Bitcoin, and Ether in general. Beyond that, I think we've seen from the, our fund is focused on the derivatives market, and we've seen an uptick both in the volume of both spot and derivatives being traded, and then things like the future spread, so the premium you pay to buy a Bitcoin or Ether future is going back upwards. It was in the negative or flat range for a couple months there, which indicates a bearish or neutral perspective on what's going to happen, and now we see it back up around 8 to 10% on an annualized yield basis for Bitcoin and Ether futures. The same with options skews. So the purchasing behavior of calls is starting to trend more bullish as well, especially into the latter half of this year. Interestingly, I think also you notice that Ether futures and Ether skew is slightly more bullish than that of Bitcoin, suggesting that at least the derivatives market believes that there's more upside in Ether at present.
So Alexander, we're seeing this kind of move happen while volumes generally are lower than they were back in May. Not just in dollar terms, but also in terms of the actual coins that are being traded. They're much lower than they were when prices were just about where they were earlier in the year. Is there some concern, at least, that there are just a few players now moving around in the market that's kind of creating this move up, and yet there might not be any legs to stand on? Not enough interest besides just these few players, and we don't know why they're participating in the market just yet. Is there some concern that that's kind of changing or at least creating a dynamic where you see these higher prices but with lower volume?
Yeah, I think that's one reasonable narrative. I guess as a counterpoint, I would say that it might indicate actually the opposite, that we had this big spike up in price to 64,000, kind of a frenzy of buying, especially on the retail side, and then a crash down in lower volumes, and now we're rising back up, and the volumes, they're starting to rise significantly, but they're not where they were back a couple months ago. And so it suggests that there's still room for that frenzy and that high level buying activity to still occur, but we're starting at a higher base floor price. And in addition, a lot of I'm not sure exactly where you're pulling your volumes from, but typically that's exchange volume, and a lot of the big buying goes on via OTC. Like, we buy millions of dollars of Bitcoin, and it doesn't show up on those metrics because we're buying at OTC just from a direct counterparty. And so if you see more institutional buying as opposed to retail, it might not show up necessarily as a higher volume on some of those ways of tracking it that you see publicly.
So the big story of this weekend was Afghanistan, not crypto. And I'm curious what your thoughts are about where this major global story fits into crypto. I mean, will what's happening in Afghanistan have an effect on the crypto markets, or not really?
I think generally, right, like when there's more political instability and more quantitative easing or, reckless money printing, that's all benefits something that's a hard asset that has a finite supply and is immune to political or policy decisions or reckless wars and all of that. I don't think the people in Afghanistan this week are probably moving the price of Bitcoin too greatly, but I think it does slightly reduce the standing of the United States and its power in the world, which thus reduces the power of the dollar as the global reserve currency, which can only help other currencies like Bitcoin, for example. But I don't think Afghanis are like buying Bitcoin to such extreme volumes, or people are buying Bitcoin because they're worried about Middle East instability in a way that would change the price too drastically.